From the bleachers to the bar, this is the Home Runs and Handshakes podcast. Welcome in, friends. It is episode 7 of the Home Runs and Handshakes podcast. He is 12th round pick Frank Nova. I'm on a break this week, but I'm James Neveau, and I'm here, gracing you with my presence anyway, as the Cubs have officially hit the unofficial midway point of the season. The dignitaries and everybody are gathered down in Atlanta for the All-Star game, but Frank Nova and I are here working hard and bringing you all of the hard-hitting Cubs talk you can possibly imagine. Frank, were there any random Cubs of yesteryear you wanted to bring up today before we get into the meat of this thing?
I like the years in the 70s when the Cubs had a couple of years where they would just come roaring out of the gates and they would fall apart kind of after the All-Star break. So it was always fun because the Cubs would have like 4 guys on the All-Star games at the All-Star game. So one year they had Jerry Morales and Rick Monday, and I think Ray Burris went, and I don't even remember. And then the wheels would just fall off the wagon, and they'd finish in 5th place, about 25 games behind the Phillies.
Well, fortunately for us, the Phillies no longer in the same division as the Cubs, but the common theme here, the Cubs are indeed in first place in the National League Central, and Frank, only the second best record in the National League as well, a game behind the Los Angeles Dodgers as we hit that midway point of the season. Cubs have the best run differential in baseball, coming off of back-to-back wins in the Bronx against the New York Yankees. Gotta say, a lot of things looking kind of up for the North Siders. I know that they've had their ups and their downs. The Brewers have been beating the brakes off of everybody lately. But as things stand, the Cubs well within a playoff spot right now, and talking about additions after the All-Star break and before the trade deadline. And so we decided to start this episode with kind of a examination of where the Cubs are, but then more importantly, an examination of where we think they're going to be going. So Frank, I'm just going to throw out the first question here to you. And I think I probably know the answer to this, but overall, as we hit the All-Star break, what is your feeling about this team? Are you satisfied with where they've gotten to? Were you not expecting this level of play? What is your kind of current feeling about the Chicago Cubs as we hit the All-Star break?
Well, I mean, I expect them to be better than last year for sure. I figured they would be in playoff contention. Nobody was expecting Pete Crow to suddenly become the second coming of Mickey Mantle.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knew Kyle Tucker was going to be good. And Seiya is one of those guys who, when he's healthy, he can hit. So, you kind of could see where they could be on this sort of a trajectory. Satisfied? No, because one of the big problems they've got is Jed Hoyer needs to get a starting pitcher yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
They've rolled 2 bullpen games. I mean, the bullpen game the other night became the Jeff Spicoli revenge game.
Jordan Wicks helped a little bit with that. Let's be clear here. They were relatively competitive until he started, throwing out the meatballs there in New York. That was a rough performance, if I have to say.
Yeah. Bellinger almost had a 4 home run game, which would have made him a Bronx legend. It would have been fun because it would have made him a Bronx legend, and they would have had to sign him because there would have been such an outcry from the fans in New York, and would have taken them out of the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes.
Mm-hmm.
But they can't keep rolling a bullpen every 5 games. Ben Brown has pitched well in his 2 games back in Iowa, but you got to get somebody more reliable than Ben Brown.
Yeah.
And Jordan Wicks, we saw the other day what Jordan Wicks in a microcosm, where he can have kind of a rough start, straightens it out for a few innings, and then it falls apart for him. And it's all in the course of 1 game. And that's the same thing with Ben Brown too. And I know you've discussed Brown having the stuff to be a bullpen arm, and he's got the stuff for it, but because he has had so many first inning struggles, you bring him in as a reliever. Whenever you bring him in, that's his first inning.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know how he would do in that type of a role. But they need to get a starting pitcher. They need to get him quickly. Um, you know, that's the immediate need. You'd like to get a third baseman so that way Matt Shaw can kind of become your bench glove, pinch runner sort of thing.
Mhm.
But they need one. Well, we've talked about this before, so there's no reason to keep repainting the same wall. They need one starting pitcher. One starting pitcher would be great. Two would be better.
And I think that's exactly what they're going to target at the deadline. And I do take very seriously the idea that they're going to be looking at beyond just short-term rentals. I think they are going to be looking at a guy that can be plugged into their rotation next season, since we have no idea when Justin Steele is going to be back, and you have all these other questions surrounding guys like Jordan Wicks, like Javier Assad. I do feel like this is a team that they're going to try to really bolster that starting pitching depth, and they're really going to try to build around having guys like Steele, like Imanaga, like Cade Horton in the rotation for the next couple of seasons, but you still need to continue to add pieces to that. And I do think the Cubs will do that. But we're going to kind of get into some of that trade deadline stuff here in a little bit. I do want to say that I am satisfied with how well the Cubs have played in the first half of the season. I do think that the biggest thing that stood out to me has been just the ability to consistently raise their level of play when it starts to slip a little bit, right? Like we saw it in June. The offense was really struggling at times. They were not able to put runs on the board. They were losing games we really did not think they should have been losing, but they managed to right that ship, and they did it through just a wide variety of different avenues. And especially with their pitching staff, they've been able to really kind of cobble that together. The bullpen has been remarkable this season. Your Caleb Thielbars of the world, your Brad Kellers, your Daniel Palencias. I don't think any one of us would have penciled those guys into this bullpen this season and be like, you know what? That feels really great. And we're so confident with that group. And they've just gone out there and they've shoved. And that same goes for Drew Pomeranz, who they picked up off the scrap heap. The same goes for Chris Flexen, kind of the same thing. The Cubs have had kind of an uncanny ability in the years that they've been in contention of going out and finding the Trevor Cahill type of guys where other teams have given up on them and they end up playing really important roles in their bullpen. And yeah, I absolutely want them to go out and get another guy that's going to potentially kind of lock things down the last couple of innings of a ball game. But I do have to give the Cubs credit where it's due that they've been able to do that with their bullpen and to keep themselves in games and at least give themselves that opportunity, even if their offense is struggling on a given night. And so I think that I'm really satisfied with where the Cubs are right now in terms of what they've been able to accomplish. But as you kind of alluded to repeatedly there, I think that there is still plenty that can be done to shore this thing up and to get it going in the right direction. And I think that we're going to have a really robust conversation about that. I do also want to point out, by the way, I think, you know what? This seems like a good opportunity here. This is not exactly within script, but I think it does need to be, repeated. I never in a million years would have thought that Pete Crow-Armstrong would be at the point that he is right now, leading the National League in wins above replacement this season, already a 25-25 guy. When you're getting mentioned in the same breath as guys like Eric Davis, that's pretty dang good. And I really think that the Cubs have benefited in a big way from that. And I think we all knew Kyle Tucker was going to be Kyle Tucker, and he's just been this like steady Eddie, consistently getting on base, consistently driving in runs, top 10 WAR in the league, if I recall correctly. We knew that guy was going to be that guy. But the straw that has stirred the drink this season has been Pete Crow-Armstrong. And Frank, I have to say, like, we've sung his praises a lot on this podcast. I think we need to continue to do it right this very second as we kind of look at the first half of this season and just, again, get out the church choir and have them praise this kid because he has been absolutely unbelievable.
Well, I've been a Cub fan for over 50 years, and the Cubs have never had anybody like him.
That's true.
Half a century of baseball, and this is the first. It's not like you could say he's the best center fielder the Cubs have had since Adolfo Phillips, or
Yep.
at this point, is he the best since Hack Wilson? I think he's Wildfire Schulte. I think he's the best ever.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a, prestigious list of guys. I mean, you're talking about like your Felix PAs of the world, your Corey Pattersons, your one really good year of Dexter Fowler. Like, you're not looking at a team that has been able to generate the kind of offense and defense in center field that this kid's been able to do. You got a little bit of a taste of it with Cody Bellinger, but you just did not have the game-breaking speed threat with a guy like that. And now you've got this like incredible complete package. And does he strike out a little bit too much? Sure. Of course he does. He's also still a very young player, still figuring this game out. I do think that his plate discipline will improve with time. I just, like you said, Frank, like this is not something that we're used to seeing in Chicago. And we're not used to seeing a guy who, in all honesty, is very seriously in the MVP conversation. If you had come to us before the season started and said, which Cub do you think has the best opportunity to win National League MVP? We would have said Kyle Tucker running away.
Oh, yeah.
In the easiest conversation in history, PCA is ahead of Kyle Tucker in my estimation in that category. And I've seen really compelling arguments that say that he should win MVP even over Shohei Ohtani, even if I don't necessarily agree with it. I think that he is firmly and correctly in that conversation.
Yeah, I have a real hard time giving MVP to an offensive player who doesn't wear a glove.
I get behind that completely, but his WAR is completely preposterous. Like for a guy who really only hits, it's absolutely nuts.
Oh, yeah, he is unquestionably the best offensive player in baseball, not named Aaron Judge.
That guy is a monster. Like he's
Herman Munster
already. Is he at 8 WAR? Is that correct on the
probably?
Season? Oh, it's completely.
He's just. I mean, he's being Ted Williams this year.
Yeah. I mean, you're seeing the comparisons to like the best seasons of like Willie frickin' Mays. Like,
oh yeah,
that's something. That's really something.
Yeah, I think the best WAR by any Yankee player in a single season was Mickey Mantle in 1956. I won't swear to that because I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah,
but I'm pretty sure that's it. And Judge is going to blow that out of the water.
He's going to crush it. And like you saw it during the series against the Yankees, even though the Yankees are definitely struggling in a lot of key areas. Their bullpen's not very good. Their lineup hasn't been as successful as you would think that it would be with guys like Giancarlo Stanton, Jazz Chisholm, Cody Bellinger, and those types of players in it. But, all that aside, let's get back to, the task at hand, and that's the praise of Pete Crow. I mean, this is a guy, again, he's top 10 in the league in RBI, 4th in stolen bases, 2nd in all of baseball and WAR. Like he is just doing things that we've never seen a Cub do. To me, he's like Javier Baez on steroids. And I know that's, probably sacrilegious to those of us who worshiped at the Church of El Mago. But I do have to say, playing center field at the level, like Javi Baez, great shortstop, not going to take anything away from him. Pete Crow is the best defensive outfielder in baseball, and I don't think it's particularly close right now. That kid can run down baseballs that nobody else can, run down. Incredible arm. And then, what he's been able to do at the plate and on the bases. He is just this incredible weapon that has transformed the Cubs lineup and has the potential to continue transforming it so long as they keep, some talent around him in order to really do it. I just have been, nothing if not blown away by what Pete Crow-Armstrong's been able to do.
Yeah, I mean, the potential was always there. I always figured he was going to, everybody knew he was going to be an elite glove. That was never a question from the day he was drafted. All his time in Team USA, he was doing all the things in center field before he was ever drafted that he's doing now.
Mm-hmm.
But at the plate, I would have been completely happy this year if he could, be a consistent 100 to 110 weighted runs created plus.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he's just obliterated that.
Yeah. I think that there's just no way you could have possibly foreseen this level of production. I think this is like a wildest dream scenario for sure. And I know that we still have a lot of baseball left to play this season. The miles do start adding up, especially when you're not getting a break during the All-Star week, as Pete Crow is going to be, manning center field for the National League down in Atlanta. But I think that it's so important for him to be able to hit off these milestones and to participate at this level and just continue to get onto the national consciousness. Frank, I am not a guy who's like, oh, I love ESPN. I love the way that they portray the baseball products. they love PCA on ESPN, and rightfully so. And I'm so glad the Cubs have a player that's at that like Anthony Rizzo level of, oh, the broadcast is going to drool all over him. I really missed that the last few years.
And what's really funny is because I live out of market, I have the luxury of being able to watch. When I can, I'll watch a broadcast of the opposing team.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, it's fun to see just how good or how bad their broadcasts are. For instance, the poor Miami Marlins, they have got an absolute, positively best in class broadcast. Their broadcast is unbelievably great. They've got great broadcasters. Whoever their segment producer is should get paid more than the players because their segments that they do during games are so good. But when the Cubs played the Marlins, I got to watch Marlins broadcasts, and it was fun to watch them. But that's the one I just remember. If I was a Marlins fan, I'd be like, hey, the Marlins are in this game too. Why do you keep talking about the center fielder on the Cubs?
Yep. I will also point out to our listeners who may not recall, where do you think the Cubs got Len Casper from? Clearly, the Marlins have a little bit of a knack for identifying play-by-play talent. Man, Len Casper is he's awesome, man. It's a bummer that he did White Sox radio, but I still, if I had to put money on it, would guess he is probably the top choice to replace Pat Hughes whenever that day ends up coming for the Cubs. I really think that he would be a guy who would fill that role seamlessly. But this isn't the Len Casper podcast. We just want to reflect on like how much, praise you can heap upon a guy like a PCA. But we also want to talk about some of the other guys on the team too. And Frank, I know you constantly talk about how diamond in the roughy and how amazing it has been that the Cubs have been able to unlock Daniel Palencia. Saturday's game had all of the hallmarks of potentially slipping away from this team in the ninth inning. The Yankees were just, they're lurking. They're still potentially going to be back in this thing. And then Palencia just went, nope. Absolutely not going to happen. Slam the door on him. Did it again Sunday. This kid has been a revelation as a closer. And even if the Cubs are looking at adding bullpen help down the stretch, you have to think that as of right now, Craig Counsell has to be saying the rest of this bullpen, we can basically plug guys in wherever we want to. Daniel Palencia has to be your closer unless you go out and swing for a guy like a Clase or a Mason Miller. I think that that's absolutely going to be the case down the stretch.
And Mason Miller, he's throwing hard, but hasn't been as effective as he was last year.
Yeah.
Palencia, I
think for me, it's a cost thing, though. Like the cost you would have to give up to get a Mason Miller kind of makes it to where you almost have to give him an opportunity to earn that closer role if you do acquire him.
Yeah, and I don't see the point in it right now. Like when they went out and got Aroldis Chapman, you sat there and said, okay, well, Hector Rondon is okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this was before he got hurt. But, when you go out, but if you can get Aroldis Chapman, even Hector Rondon will be like, well, yeah, he's Chapman. He's your guy.
Yep.
No, Daniel Palencia is taking complete ownership of the ninth inning. He's walking out there, and each of his testicles is 50 pounds. And
yeah,
and especially at home,
Contreras about it.
And especially at home when Gasolina starts playing and he comes out, it's just, the other team. There is a psychological aspect to it.
Always.
We like to look at raw numbers, and his numbers are great, but there is that psychological aspect where, basically the other team knows they really only have 24 outs because they're not going to be able to do anything with Daniel Palencia on the mound.
Yeah. And I think that the Cubs will absolutely work on getting him the ball more effectively. I think that that's like you're looking for a 7th, 8th inning guy. I know that we checked off all of the names earlier in this podcast, the Thielbars, the Kellers, the Braziers of the world. Like the Cubs have had a lot of really effective late game options to kind of get him the ball. It's never going to hurt to try to go out and get at least 1 or 2 more at the deadline. And I think that they will have the assets and the pieces to be able to go out there and do that. And so I do absolutely think that, relief pitcher has to be on the list of things that you want to get to. But Frank, I think that this is a good time in the podcast to start talking about this just from your perspective. the absolute biggest need that the Chicago Cubs have right now, with about 2 weeks and change left until the trade deadline. If you could only pick one, and I know they have multiple, but if you could only pick one for them to address, which one was it going to be?
Starting pitcher.
I think
without question.
That to me, like, I think that you could probably make an argument for one other position, and that would be third base. But I think that starting pitcher, just 1,000%, they have got to go and get not just like a dude. They need to go get a dude that could be a third starter in a playoff rotation right now.
Yeah.
I 100% believe that. And that's going to cost a little bit in terms of prospect capital or whatever it is. But I absolutely think they need to get that job done.
Well, fortunately, all the guys that would be most likely to be trade bait are just crushing the ball in Iowa,
Absolutely.
which is going to make it much more enticing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Casey, Alcantara, and Long are all just turning into beasts right now, and you know that they have it in their mind that they're going to be traded at the deadline, and if they get traded, they're going to be in the big leagues.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So,
I thought any of those three that get traded, they are debuting by the end of the season for sure.
yeah.
The only reason they're not debuting in Chicago is because PCA and Tucker are playing so well, and I do not see a scenario where Ian Happ, is relinquishing a starting spot. I think he's going to be in the lineup more often than not.
The only thing would be an injury.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly what I was about to ask you. Is I was going to say, do you think the Cubs have Ian Happ get shut down with, like, I don't want to call it a fake injury, but an injury that something's like nagging at him? I could see a scenario where they end up deciding we're going to keep X guy for whatever reason. We think that he profiles the best at any of the three positions, whatever it is. I think that's more and more of a possibility as time goes on. So I think that could also be a potential trade deadline acquisition, quote unquote, if they wanted to do something like that.
Well, I've said before, getting a Mike Talkman type, even if it's not actual Mike Talkman, but somebody who you can bring in off the bench and play any of the three outfield positions.
Yeah.
I don't know that you would want to bring up Kevin Alcantara just to sit him on the bench. He's the three position outfielder that's on the 40 man down in Iowa.
And he needs to play. If he's going to be up here, he needs to play.
Yeah.
Sorry, I did not mean to hijack the conversation on this, by the way. I did want to stay on the most pressing need, but I'm sorry, Frank, go ahead, man.
And my thing with third base is, well, first of all, now that the Red Sox have surged, Alex Bregman's out of the conversation.
In, then out, then in, then out. You never quite know with the Red Sox. That is a interesting situation.
Well, right now they're in a wild card spot.
Yes, and they're not going to be dealing Bregman. I know they're probably like, well, are we going to keep him? But no, none of that matters right now. They're like, nope, we're in it to win it right now.
Yeah. So basically, if you want a third baseman that you can bring in and sit Matt Shaw, it's going to have to be Suarez.
Yeah, I think it's Suarez or bust at this point for sure.
Yeah.
With him. I think the Cubs really do need to evaluate, like, how bad do you want to win this season? Because that is a guy you're going to have to give up a really strong prospect to get, even though he is only a rental.
Yeah. And the funny thing is Arizona isn't a team that would need to rebuild, because their biggest problem this year has been injuries, not lack of talent.
Which to me indicates that you're probably going to lean more toward trading guys that you don't have team control over, because you still think you can potentially compete next season.
Right. So if you're going to, I'm sure the first thing they would do is ask for Matt Shaw.
Probably, honestly. And why wouldn't you? Like, I'd be like, I don't know, Matt Shaw hadn't really done much. You might want to send him this way. Yeah, Frank, they've got Jordan Lawler in the minor leagues, though. I wonder if that's going to be a situation where they're just like, we've got this guy already. We don't necessarily need another, guy in that position. But if you want to give us Matt Shaw, like, we can, try him out at second base or whatever.
Right. Yeah, you could plug Shaw in at any infield position.
Although, to be fair, they do still have Kettle Marte, too.
I would say Kettle Marte is at second.
He's only an all-star. It's no big deal.
Right.
That's the thought, though, for me, is that why not ask for a guy like that? That it might end up being like an Isaac Paredes kind of situation where you give him up and then watch him, crush for the Diamondbacks, you just have to be willing to take that bargain. Like, I really do believe that firmly. So I think that, to me, there is a really compelling argument again to be made that third base is the Cubs' biggest need right now. I have to agree with you, though, and go starting pitching. And I think that the Cubs can try all they want to go get a cost controlled type of guy out on the market. I think that there are certainly players that fit that bill, but I'm also firmly of the opinion that they just need to go out and get somebody that's good. They need to go out, even if it's a Merrill Kelly. I'm not a big fan of oh, we can reclaim, Zach Gallen. I'm not in that headspace right now. You don't have time to kind of wait for him to get it together. I think that a player like that, I'd much rather go out and get a guy like Merrill Kelly, even if it costs more. And also, if the Cubs want to try to get a pitcher from the Marlins, you could go get Alcantara, but you could also go get Edward Cabrera, who is also arbitration eligible and pitching really well for the Marlins. So I think they have a lot of options, and I know they're going to want to try to prioritize getting a guy who's under control for longer. I just think you need to get, like you said, maybe even multiple options here. Maybe one longer-term guy and one rental. I don't think you can be satisfied with only one pitcher at this point.
No, and if you can get one longer-term guy, it also, that's when you can start thinking about, okay, a team that, like the Marlins, for instance, they're a team that can ride out the growing pains of a Jordan Wicks or a Ben Brown.
Yeah, absolutely. That would have been a perfect landing spot for a guy like Hayden Wesneski too, if that had been what they had needed to do with him. But obviously, we all know where he ended up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so, go ahead.
But the other thing with third base is it would be great to go out and get Suarez, but if you don't, Matt Shaw is a plus player because of his glove.
Yeah. No, it's not like you're. Let me put it this way. You're not losing games because of Matt Shaw, but you're not winning games because of him either. And you can have the potential to go out and get a guy like Eugenio Suarez who can win you baseball games. That, to me, is the big difference there and why you would take that big swing. And then also, lest we forget, you keep him off of another roster that could potentially end up burning you down the stretch. If there's one thing we've seen Suarez be able to do, it's been to just absolutely pepper the Cubs with home runs, and I'd rather not see that.
Yeah, I agree. And, he loves hitting in Wrigley Field. We know that.
Sure frickin' does, man. I will tell you right now that dude, every time he's in that ballpark, he straight up goes 2017 era Nick Castellanos in that joint, man. I have been blown away watching him play over the years against the Cubs.
It was rough for a couple of years when you had both him and Joey Votto in the same lineup.
Yeah, no duh, right? Just constant. I'm I already had to deal with this with the Cardinals, where every guy that they pick up ends up absolutely tormenting the Cubs. I don't need to deal with this with the Reds too. Can we just not?
Yeah.
All right. So
the other thing I did want to talk about with the bullpen is one of the things that the two people other than Jed Hoyer going out and getting the guys, the two people that have been most instrumental in making the bullpen work have been Tommy Hotovy, who has been working with the pitchers on getting the most out of what they've got. And Craig Counsell is so excellent. This is what he did in Milwaukee for years. He knows exactly when to put guys in at which spot where they can succeed. That's why you don't have an eighth inning guy and a seventh inning guy and a sixth inning guy. He picks the pitchers to match the situation.
I'm trying to remember who on the Cubs was just talking about that, where he was blown away by the fact the Cubs don't necessarily have a seventh inning, eighth inning guy. He's just no, we all can fill each of those spots. It may have been Chris Flexen, but it was one of those guys that just talked about the way Counsell works with that. And people, may I don't know if they still wonder why the Cubs got rid of David Ross, in favor of Craig Counsell. That's very high on the list, was always his bullpen management in Milwaukee. He always knew what he was doing with that, and he had an incredible feel for it.
Well, not to mention, if Ross was managing the Cubs right now, Justin Turner would have about 250 plate appearances.
And I know there are still people who are really ticked off that he's still on the roster, and I just defy those people to point to a guy that's in the organization right now that you're yeah, Who do you want to bring in that position? Anybody right now? No, they really don't have anybody who's going to fill that, like, not often used like bench bat. They don't have it right now.
What, you're not on the James Triantos train?
No, not necessarily. If he wants to come up here and prove me wrong, I welcome him to do it, as we always do when we make broad pronouncements on this show. Frank, which deal do you think gets done first for the Cubs? Do you think they go starting pitching first, or do you think they end up landing a guy who can like play third base? What direction do you think Jed Hoyer is going to be going the next, week or so?
I think starting pitching, just because there's a lot of options. It's not like with Suarez where, the Diamondbacks are going to sit back and just wait for everyone to come to them.
Mm-hmm.
What Hoyer can do is let's say he decides, okay, Moises Ballesteros is the guy to go. Just as an example, I'm not advocating it one way or the other.
How dare you?
But if he decides, okay, Moises Ballesteros is the guy to go, he can call a bunch of different general managers and say, okay, I'm ready to move Ballesteros. And, he could say to the Pirates, okay, let's talk about Keller. And he can call the Mariners and say, let's talk about Alcantara. Let's talk about Cabrera and whatever other teams have, the White Sox. There's starting pitchers that are going to be made available at the deadline. Even the Braves are out of it, so they might be talking too.
Yep.
So, there's a lot of opportunities here where the Cubs can, Jed Hoyer, or, if you want to believe that it's Carter Hawkins making these calls.
Yeah, I'm not going to buy that. Sorry, Frank. That's what I'm not going to be going with you to.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any. I could be the Cubs general manager. Carter does.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe that might be my caption next week.
Hawkins, or like Cubs GM and name only.
Cubs GM.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think that I know there are teams who are going to be like, oh, well, we might still be in. Oh, we might still be out. Fortunately, those teams are not realistically in playoff contention. And I think that you could see some movement. You want to know the most insane thing I saw today, by the way? Somebody float the idea that the Nationals might decide that they want to trade Mackenzie Gore because they want to try to do a longer term rebuild. And I was like, if there is any world in which that is actually a possibility, Jed Hoyer better fly out to Washington and refuse to leave unless a deal gets done, because that would be insane. Like, I cannot even begin to describe how seismic of a trade that would be if the Cubs were able to swing that. And I know there's been all that talk that they're willing to do the longer-term deal for more control, and they're willing to give up the assets to get that done. That's like a whole other, level.
Yeah.
Cubs, and they're probably one of the few teams that would be willing to just absolutely, gut their farm system to make something like that happen.
Yeah, and he'd be worth it.
Oh, 1,000%. God, can you imagine having him as the center? Oh, dude, that's something that you really can look at and just be like, yeah, I think this is pretty solid. I think this is a guy that we can build around. Like, can you imagine having PCA, Mackenzie Gore, and Kyle Tucker on the same team? That is a hell of a big three to start from, and then like potentially move forward with. And you've got all that team control. You've got that youth and excitement. It would just be absolutely unbelievable. And I know that's very pie in the sky, but as soon as I saw that, I was like, hey, Nats, go right on ahead and do something stupid like that. Please just let him go. Like, that would be, totally fine with me.
Yeah. I don't know how realistic that is.
Hey, you know what? You never can say never in today's day and age. I'm sure there have been players over the years that were like, wait, you just got traded. Like a Luka Doncic, for example, would be a good example of that, where it's just like, wait, they traded him of all guys? I'm just saying, man, you never quite know how this sport's going to go. All right, Frank, we've talked a lot about the current Chicago Cubs. We can talk at least a little bit here about the next generation of the Chicago Cubs. This is Major League Baseball Draft Week, where everybody looks at YouTube videos and immediately assumes they know their prospects, and the Cubs undoubtedly going to turn some heads with their class this year, I'm sure, even though I could probably say I've watched maybe a handful of games cumulatively that these guys have played. their first couple of picks. They went heavy outfield to start with. I believe it was 3 of their first 6 picks were all outfielders, or 4 of their first 6
4 of
picks.
their first 6.
And then they went on a massive pitching run. So basically, from the first round to the 9th round, it was all pitchers, all outfielders. The Cubs went very pitching heavy this season. They got Ethan Conrad out of Wake Forest. They got Kane Kepley out of North Carolina. And then pitcher Dominic Reed out of Abilene Christian in the first 3 rounds of this draft. It was definitely, I thought, an interesting draft just in terms of the sheer volume of pitching that went out there and got. And Frank, I also was really surprised. They went really, really, really right-hand heavy with the pitching staff too. Like, I think that at least half of their draft picks this season were right-handed pitchers. Were there any surprises to you in seeing that? Do you know anything about any of the players? Like, the floor is yours, man. We are talking draft prospects here, and all caveats, we're not the smartest dudes.
Yeah, there's a reason why if you're listening to us, you probably listen to Greg Huss too.
Please listen to Greg. Do not just listen to us. We're on the Huss bandwagon, baby. We're on the Huss bus. I 1,000% agree with that.
Conrad's a guy, everybody said that, had he been healthy, he would have been a top 10 pick. And that could very well be true, but he wasn't.
For those of you who are not aware, he had a season-ending shoulder injury. I believe injured his throwing shoulder.
Diving for a ball. He
had a really solid season before that, but then, it kind of all went sideways for him.
And, diving for a ball, he tore the labrum in his throwing arm.
There you go.
I think that is similar to what happened with Aramis Ramirez one year. He tore a labrum. I think it was in his throwing arm. I won't swear to it. But
you wear white after labrum day? Sorry, that was terrible. Terrible joke. I ought to be put cake for that. Claire's like, that's it. I quit the podcast. I'm out of here.
But the one thing I did notice in this draft for the Cubs was, we'll get to, Conrad is, he's a gamble. He is. And, what it looks like they did was they went project heavy with college players. And that way, I think they're going to try with Conrad, with Kepley, with Reed. I think they're going to try with all 3 of those guys to try to sign them under slot. So that way they've got some extra money for like Caleb Wing or Josiah Josiah Hartshorn is a guy. He won like they had like the high school all-star, all-American high school game or whatever. And he won the home run derby. He's a switch hitter, big power bat. They took him in the 6th round, presumably because he's probably leaning towards college. But if they can go under slot enough, he might be a guy that they can sign, get him into the organization, and in a couple of years, you got something.
Absolutely. And I also want to point out they seem to go really speed heavy too with their first couple of picks too, because I know Kane Kepley, he stole, I think it was like 45 bases last season for North Carolina. And then Conrad is also a guy that can really steal bases. I think he had like roughly 45 in his career, and he has the speed to play any of the outfield positions. I feel like that, just from the limited experience that I had watching him, that really did kind of seem like the direction that they were going to go, because they just wanted to get the guys who could potentially get active on the base paths and then be useful defensively too. I think it probably accelerates your timeline a little bit if you're able to add those things into it, and then you kind of, Sherpa their bats along as they move along in the system.
And Kepley's the type of guy. He doesn't have a lot of slug to his game, but whatever slug exists because he can turn singles into doubles, doubles into triples.
And there's nothing wrong with that either. Like, you need guys like that in your lineup for sure.
Yeah, there's he, aside from the fact that he's an outfielder, there's actually quite a bit of Nico Horner to his game.
That is a really great comparison, and I think I saw a few other folks make that comparison as well. So again, Frank knows what he's talking about. Good job, man.
Another guy I did get to watch was Pierce Coppola for University of Florida. Go Gator. Go. People always try to turn me into a Gator fan. But he's a big guy, strikes out a lot of people, always hurt. So he's a 7th rounder, but he strikes out. He has like a 2 strikeout an inning ratio or something ridiculous like that.
Correct. Yep.
So he might be a guy that they'll bring him in and turn him into a bullpen arm and fast track him.
Yes, that's a great idea, and I think the scouting report that I had read for him seemed to indicate that. By the way, those of you guys who do not know who he is, Pierce Coppola is 6'8", 250 pounds. He is a monstrous man, and I'm willing to bet probably throws the ball a sight harder than a lot of Cubs relievers are capable of throwing it.
And he's from Verona, New Jersey, so he likes his gabagool.
I see. I always knew that Frank can always pick those guys out of a lineup, and he immediately knows like who like the New York, New Jersey guys are. Like you know, he sniffs them out. It's remarkable.
Well, although because he's so tall, he kind of looks like the Italian version of Ed from Green Acres.
See, we thought that we were, this hip, young, happening podcast, and now we're sitting here and it's like, nope, we certainly are not. We're making Green Acres references, for God's sake.
The stores.
There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, I'm obvious to people that you and I are not spring chickens whatsoever, and we routinely prove it on this here podcast.
I'm on camera. There's no way I'm passing for anything younger than 6. I wear every day of my almost 63 years on my face. It's just,
it's all the Malort shots you've taken over the years, Frank. I think that they eventually start to catch up with you. I still think, frankly, I still think that you definitely look younger than your age, even if you don't say that. I'm going to go ahead and go with that.
Okay.
But you sound so not convinced, dude.
No, it's fine. I'm a fat, bald man who lives in Central Florida. I could start an army down here.
And that is why we are starting a Cubs podcast, ladies and gentlemen. If the world needs anything, it needs fat white guys to start podcasts.
Absolutely. There are not enough of us doing baseball podcasts.
Well, now that we've alienated all of the non-woke folks, I suppose, do have to point out, like, we can talk at least a little bit here about the second half of the Cubs season. Very interesting scheduling coming out of the break for the Cubs. They basically don't leave the Midwest at all until mid-August because they play a bunch of home games. Their road series are against Milwaukee, St. Louis, and the White Sox. They basically don't leave the Midwest until they go up to Toronto in mid-August. Like, this is a very travel light portion of the schedule for the Cubs. You knew they were going to be getting to it when they were going on all those road trips to places like Los Angeles and to San Diego and into Texas. You kind of knew that they were going to have a period of the schedule where it was very locally focused. It is coming up for the Cubs, but again, as Frank mentioned, the resurgent Boston Red Sox are first on the agenda when they come out of the break, and then they have the Kansas City Royals, who I didn't realize were that far out of the wild card race right now in the American League. They're not having all that great of a season, and then they've got the road series against the White Sox before you end up playing right before the deadline. You go up to Miller Park and go play the Milwaukee Brewers, and I know it's not Miller Park. I don't care. I'm going to keep calling it that.
Well, when Jameson Taillon first signed with the Cubs, he did one of the headset things after a start on a Cubs broadcast, and he talked about how little travel the Cubs do.
Yeah,
and and that was a big consideration for him in picking a team.
Mm-hmm. The central location is legitimately a very good selling point for the Cubs, and I think they have to bring that up to guys when they sign here.
And it's nice for the players that they have road games against the White Sox and the Brewers, and depending on when game time is for the Brewers, they can come home, sleep in their own bed.
That's right. Absolutely. And I think that I'd love that that's not the first series out of the blocks for the second half. I love that they are doing it later. And there's that possibility that they could end up having their trade deadline acquisitions already in the fold when they go up there for that series. And also, maybe the Brewers will cool off just a little bit and not have won 7 consecutive games when the Cubs head up there. That
right.
Damn, Frank, they just do not want to go away, man. It is unbelievable, like, how often they're able to just go on these torrid runs, and you wouldn't think to yourself, oh yeah, this Brewers team is going to be 16 games above 500 at the All-Star break. I knew they would be there. They're not a bad team. They've got a lot of really great young talent on that team, but it's unbelievable just how often they're able to just like withstand this punishment and continue to hemorrhage players and still be really, really good. It's an unbelievable testament to that team.
Well, they already made their deadline acquisition. They got Brandon Woodruff back.
That is, can you believe that? You have Mizrahi on the team now, and you've got Woodruff. Crazy. Just absolutely crazy, man. The Brewers, they always reload. It's unbelievable. But again, the Cubs do come out of the break playing the Boston Red Sox. They're going to throw, I believe, Lucas Giolito and Garrett Crochet, I think, are both scheduled to pitch against the Cubs in that series.
Mm-hmm.
Garrett Crochet is unbelievable, dude. That is going to be a heck of a showdown on Sunday at Wrigley Field. Cannot wait to watch that one. And then again, the Royals have not been playing the best baseball, but they've got a lot of really talented players on that team. I do feel like they're a group that can maybe start to turn things around a little bit. Like it seems like we haven't heard the last of that team. So by all means, Cubs, please make sure that doesn't start happening against you next week at Wrigley.
Well, also when they're in Kansas City might want to interest them in a gently used Seth Lugo.
That's also true. And a guy that I've seen multiple people connect to the Cubs has been like, hey, Seth Lugo, this could be a guy you could maybe get some use out of. And I'm not entirely opposed to that idea.
Well, every team that has a starting pitcher available is going to get linked to the Cubs. Everyone knows, because between losing Steele, losing Assad, losing Tyone, now they need starting pitchers.
And I will also point out, like, yes, that's going to entice teams to come talk to the Cubs. It also enables the Cubs to go, we're having really good conversations with this team about this guy. You absolutely have a little bit of leverage on your side if you're the Cubs, even if teams know you have to get a deal done. It doesn't have to be with them.
Right. Yeah,
I love that notion.
Like, this is what I was saying before. If they decide that all they want to do is move, like I use Ballesteros as an example, whichever guy they decide that they doesn't fit into their long range plan, they can say, okay, here's what we're offering. First one to come with a starting pitcher that we like gets him.
I like that idea a lot. Have like almost like an auction where it's like, here's the guy, come get him.
Yeah.
Dinner bell, whatever it is. Yeah, I'm entirely on board with that.
I mean, Ballesteros looks like he's going to be pretty much a DH in the majors. And
yeah,
so, you got teams that would be happy to have a bat like him, and
as they should. And I love Moises Ballesteros.
So do I.
But you have to, at some point, you have to, accept reality. And the Cubs are going to need a DH. Like, it's not like Seiya Suzuki is going to be your DH for the long term, but there are other guys in that system that can slug too. And I think that they will probably be here after Ballesteros will be. So I just don't think that the timeline necessarily matched up.
And, the Cubs, I'd love to see the Cubs talk turkey with Kyle Tucker and his agent, because if they knew that Kyle Tucker was going to be their right fielder for the next 10 years, that would also give them more options, because then they'd say, okay, we can offer up Owen Casey. We don't, we're not going to let Owen Casey rot in AAA for another year when we can get something for him.
I think that his status on the team is a very strong indicator of how confident the Cubs are that they'll be able to keep Kyle Tucker. I think that that's not an original thought. I'm sure that other folks have had that thought too, but that to me seems extremely likely, that if they think that they're going to lose Kyle Tucker, Owen Casey is still on your roster after July 31st.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got that out of the way. I think we can afford a little bit of all-star talk now here at the end of the podcast, because it'll be, the most dated information the most quickly. But, did you have any sort of reaction to seeing Kyle Tucker batting 7th and Pete Crow-Armstrong batting 9th in the all-star game? The only thing that I thought of is I went full conspiracy theory meathead here, And I was like, I see what you're doing, Dave Roberts. You're having all of your beloved Dodgers at the top of the lineup so they can get out of the game faster. And you're going to make Kyle Tucker and Pete Crow-Armstrong work in the hot Atlanta Knights and wait until they can get their at bats in that game. I see what you're doing, Dave Roberts. You're trying to weaken the Chicago Cubs. And you know what? It's not going to work, you jabroni. It's not going to happen.
Wow, I was not expecting you to shoot a promo here.
You know, I know Claire is like in the studio right now listening to this going, man, I really just need James to go off on a tangent and to call somebody a jabroni. And, you know, this felt like the moment to do.
You know, the thing with Pete Crow is play Pete Crow the whole game. I don't care. The guy's got the amount of energy he has, he's basically a can of Celsius in human form.
Yeah.
So
For now.
Yeah. So
we'll see how he's doing after 155 games.
I don't see Pete Crow ever withering. But again, I do think at some point in the next couple weeks, you are going to see an outfielder show up.
Yep.
That they can start to spell these guys a little bit.
Oh yeah, especially PCA and Tucker. Like you have to do that, and they already have started messing with Ian Happ. They're trying to get him going. They benched him on Friday. They had him bat 7th on Saturday. Like, do you think this is going to be like a? I mean, it doesn't seem to me like this is going to be like a fluke thing where it was just like, you know, these couple games before the break, we're going to have Ian Happ not bat leadoff. I think that's the status quo until he proves he can hit the baseball. Like, I think that Nico Horner is going to be batting leadoff against lefties and Michael Busch is going to be batting leadoff against righties. I think that's just going to be the status quo until Ian Happ proves he can hit the baseball again. And we know he's a guy who's going to end up getting to his consistent numbers because he always seems to do it. I think that was another really good move by Craig Counsell to be like, look, like we have to recognize the reality of this situation. Ian Happ just is not producing enough to be in the lineup or in the leadoff spot of a playoff caliber team right now. It just isn't.
And, you know, I hate to keep kicking David Ross. Actually, I don't, but but you know, Ross batted Happ third over and over and over and over again simply because that's where Happ wanted to bat.
Yep. And Craig Counsell was like, I don't care.
Yeah. You know,
good for him.
We're in the production business here. And
yep.
The fact of the matter is, you've got, you know, Tucker batting second, you've got Seiya batting third, you got Pete Crow batting fourth, and they're doing the job. They're getting it done.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Happ was getting his walks, but you know,
that's all he was getting. Didn't I see somewhere that like his wins, his WRC plus against lefties was like 56 over the last month? Like he just was appallingly bad. I think you're going to see him get benched against lefties a little bit more often too. I don't think it's just going to be a lineup demotion. I think that Ian Happ's going to sit in those games, in those situations. If you're still sitting Michael Busch against lefties sometimes, you're damn well sure you're going to bench Ian Happ in these types of situations.
Yeah, and you're going to see Seiya out and left, and you're going to see our beloved Ginger Minge in the DH spot.
I think it's going to happen, man, until they get another bench bat. I cannot imagine a different scenario than that. All right, last topic, Frank. Was really bummed out to hear Matthew Boyd was not going to be pitching in the All-Star game, decided to rest and recuperate. I thought I saw, though, that he still went down to Atlanta, right? Like he still did all of the good. I'm really glad that he's at least getting that experience. But the replacement for him definitely ruffled some feathers. Milwaukee Brewers pitcher Jacob Misiorowski gets in 5 entire games in his career, and he is a Major League All-Star. And Bob Nightingale did report that Major League Baseball approached 12 different guys, and they all said no, allegedly, to pitching in the All-Star game. Frank, first of all, what was your reaction to Misiorowski being the one that got picked? And second, do you really believe that many pitchers don't want to pitch in the All-Star game?
You know, I have a hard time caring a whole lot about who does and doesn't make the All-Star game. My feeling is if Misiorowski pitches, hey, you know, maybe he pitches against these guys and, you know, people start figuring him out a little bit. You know, that's going to happen. But as far as 12 guys saying no, all of these guys, they've all got kickers in their contract for making the All-Star team. And some of the guys, if they're asking 12 guys, some of these guys are going to be on the trade block. And those are guys that are going to want to go to the All-Star game because they're going to want to, showcase themselves a little bit for contending teams. So
I think
and
go ahead. Sorry.
finally, it's Nightingale. I don't believe anything he says.
So I am firmly in the camp of this is an exhibition. I probably do not give a crap about anything that ends up happening in it. Like Pete Crow-Armstrong wants to bat ninth, fine, whatever. I, have fun poking fun at Dave Roberts for this situation, but here we are with that. The one thing I will say, you mentioned the All-Star game kickers in those contracts. If they really passed over guys and just went to the hot hand right now in Mizorowski, that wouldn't sit right with me because, as you said, there are guys who get all-star bonuses and now we're not getting them because Mizorowski's in the game. That would literally be the only thing I would have a significant issue with, is if there was a guy who's like only making maybe like $2 million, would have gotten like a $500,000, $750,000 paycheck for being in the all-star game. Put that damn guy in the game and let the kid rest for a couple of days. That's the only place that I would have had an issue with that. Otherwise, I think it's, like you said, totally fine if they want to do it.
Yeah, my feeling is if they asked 12 guys, one of those guys had to have been Daniel Palencia. I can't see Palencia turning it down.
Oh, there's no that dude would have been like, sold. Get me on a flight to Atlanta.
Right, he would have driven to Atlanta if that's what it took.
He would have walked like that. That's just what he would have done. He would have Forrest Gumped that thing if he had to. So
because he's probably making league minimum. So
damn right.
Whatever he'd get for being in the All-Star game plus whatever kickers in his contract, it'd be a healthy chunk of change for him.
Absolutely, man. And so with that, we are going to wrap up this lovely edition of the Home Runs and Handshakes podcast, episode 7, now in the books. Frank and I are going to take a little bit of time to ourselves and recuperate a little bit. We're not pitching down in Atlanta on Tuesday night. Instead, we'll be here ready and fresh on Sunday after the Cubs hopefully sweep the Boston Red Sox at Wrigley Field to bring you another episode of the Home Runs and Handshakes podcast.